How are you doing? What is up? What's the 411? What's the goss? No, please don't be mad at me, actually. So I had to take a break. Yeah, I'm so sorry that I let you guys down. I did have to take a break though. In fact, um, I realized I was pushing myself too hard, and I have exciting news. I finally had bariatric surgery, and uh, if you've been following me on YouTube, you know that I was preparing for bariatric surgery, and hopefully a vlog will be coming out soon. But guess what, guys? I'm officially 100 pounds down. I'm so excited, but that's not an excuse. So, we're going to get back into what we talk about here at the Serial Zodiac. So, anyway, welcome to the Serial Zodiac. This intro was a little longer than usual. How are you? What's going on? Are we all having the day that we deserve? I know I am. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long, but I've missed you guys. I've been thinking about you guys, and I cannot wait for you to hear this week's episode. We are talking about the Golden State Killer today. So excited. But anyway, let's just jump right into the episode, guys. Warning, this podcast episode contains explicit language, mature themes, and thought provoking content. Listener discretion is advised, and it's not suitable for minors or the faint of heart. Between the 70s and the 90s, there was a man out there who left people terrified to sleep in their own homes. This man, who left half of the USA terrorized, knew every rule of the game. After all, he had served time with the police. He knew exactly how to commit crimes without leaving any trace of himself behind. So, for decades, he continued to commit some of the most heinous crimes you have ever heard about. This is the case of Joseph James DeAngelo. Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. was born on November 8th, 1945, in Bath, New York. His parents were Kayleen Kath, Louise DeGroth, and Joseph James DeAngelo Sr., a sergeant in the U.S. Army. With Italian roots, Joseph was the third child with two older sisters, Connie and Rebecca, and a younger brother, John. From the outside, it seemed like a typical family, but beneath the surface, things were anything but normal. When Joseph was just a kid, the family moved to West Germany due to his father's military service. It was there that Joseph reportedly witnessed something incredibly traumatic: the rape of his sister Connie by two airmen in a warehouse. This horrifying event must have left a deep scar on young Joseph, shaping his troubled future. Later, his sister Rebecca revealed that their father also subjected Joseph to abuse while he was growing up, adding another aspect of trauma to his childhood. By the time the Joseph family moved to California, Joseph was carrying a heavy burden. He attended Mills Junior High School in Rancho Cordova and later Folsom High School. While he was known to play on the junior varsity baseball team, Joseph was involved in much darker activities behind the scenes. He committed burglaries, stole mail, and even killed animals during his teenage years. These aren't your typical teenage activities. They were early signs of a disturbed mind. In 1964, Joseph joined the United States Army. He served for 22 months during the Vietnam War, working as a damage controlman on the cruiser USS Cabaret and the destroyer tender USS Piedmont. After his military service, he returned to California and pursued an associate degree in police science at Sierra College, graduating with honors. He then went on to earn his bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Sacramento State University in 1971. Joseph seemed like a man committed to law enforcement, taking postgraduate courses and completing a police internship. But this is the Serial Zodiac, and we later learn appearances can be deceiving. From 1973 to 1976, Joseph worked as a police officer in Exeter, California, focusing on burglary cases. This job was right up his alley, but not in the way you'd think. He then moved to Auburn, where he served as a police officer until 1979, and that's when things took a turn. Joseph was caught shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent from a store. He was sentenced to 6 months of probation and was fired from his job. During the process of being fired, he threatened to kill the police chief and even stalked his house. It was clear that Joseph was unraveling. Joseph's personal life was just as complicated as his professional one. In 1970, he got engaged to a nursing student named Bonnie Jean Colwell. But the relationship ended when he became manipulative and abusive. He even demanded that she help him cheat on a test and later threatened her with a gun to force her to marry him. Clearly, Joseph had a dark side that was now beginning to show. In 1973, he married Sharon Marie Huddle, and they settled in Citrus Heights, California. The couple had 3 daughters and seemed like a normal family. Sharon became a successful divorce attorney, and they lived in what appeared to be an ordinary life. But Joseph was hiding a sinister secret. During their marriage, he committed many of his crimes without his wife or children ever suspecting a thing. His eldest daughter later described him as the perfect father, and his wife believed his excuses for being away from home. Despite his seemingly normal family life, Joseph was living a dark double life. He was linked to a series of heinous crimes, including burglary, assault, and even murder. His criminal activities earned him the nickname East Area Rapist, and later, as we know him, the Golden State Killer. It's terrifying to think that someone could hide such a monstrous side from their family for so long. Now, during the 1980s, Joseph's employment history is a bit of a mystery. We know that from 1990 until his retirement in 2017, shout out to class of 2017, he worked as a truck mechanic at the Save Mark Supermarkets distribution center in Roseville. In 1996, he was arrested for not paying for gas, but the charge was dismissed. Despite these minor incidents, Joseph managed to maintain his facade of a normal life. Joseph's true nature wasn't revealed until much later. His brother in law claimed that Joseph would casually talk about the East Area rapist around the time of the crimes, almost as if he was trying to flaunt his hidden identity. Neighbors reported that he often had loud, profane outbursts and could be quite intimidating. One neighbor even received a phone call from Joseph threatening to deliver a load of death because of their barking dog. It's chilling to think about what lay beneath his calm exterior. Joseph was finally arrested in 2018 while living with a daughter and granddaughter. The arrest shocked everyone who knew him, especially his family. How could the perfect father and grandfather turn out to be a notorious serial killer? Well, here's how he went down this dark, sinister path. Joseph James DeAngelo, once a cop himself, managed to dodge capture for ages. How, you ask? Well, his background in law enforcement gave him a special edge. Born on November 8th, 1945, Joseph was a Scorpio, which is kind of a big deal because Scorpios are all about secrets and intense emotions. Now, it's almost like he took those Scorpio traits and increased the intensity, using them to plan his crimes in a way that left everyone scratching their heads. Now, think of someone who desperately needs to be in control. Well, that's Joseph for you. He had this creepy obsession with power over his victims, which he paired with a super methodical approach. It's like he was playing a twisted game of chess, always thinking 10 steps ahead of the investigators. His ability to blend into everyday life while hiding his dark side is pretty terrifying when you think about it. Joseph DeAngelo's crimes were spread across California, and DNA evidence linked him to 8 murders in places like Gotella, Ventura, Dana Point, and Irvine. There are 2 more murders in Goltova that, although lacking DNA evidence, were connected to him through his signature method of operation. But that's not all. Joseph also pleaded guilty to 3 other murders in Rancho Cordova and Vistella. And if that isn't enough, he committed over 50 rapes in multiple California counties, including Sacramento, Contra Costa, Stanislaus, San Juan, Amelia, Santa Clara, and Yolo. On top of that, he was linked to hundreds of burglaries, thefts, and other creepy activities like peeping and stalking. It's mind boggling how one person could do so much and stay hidden for years. Joseph's criminal journey started in Vistilia, where he earned the nickname Vistilia Ransacker. From 1974 to 1976, he terrorized the area, committing over 120 burglaries and 1 murder. During this time, he developed his methodical approach to breaking into homes, which included climbing fences, prying open windows, and even leaving escape routes open in case he needed a quick getaway. Now, you're probably wondering, how was he doing all this with people at home? The answer is he was not. He would go inside of these people's homes before he actually committed his actual crime. He would move things around, make sure that they weren't home, figure out their schedules. He basically would stalk them for weeks. Crazy. He would often ransack homes, rummaging through people's belongings, scattering women's underwear, and stealing random items like coins and personal trinkets, while leaving more valuable things untouched. It was like he got a thrill from the invasion itself rather than the loot. One of the most disturbing instances during the Visalia ransacker phase was the murder of Claude Sneeling. On September 11th, 1975, Joseph broke into Snelling's home. Snelling, a respected journalism professor, had previously encountered a prowler near his daughter's window earlier that year. On that fateful night, he was awoken by strange noises and went to check what was happening. He found Joseph masked and attempting to kidnap his 16-year-old daughter. In a heroic attempt to save her, Snelling confronted Joseph, but was shot twice. Joseph fled the scene, leaving Snelling to die from his injuries. After this point, everybody was after the Visalia ransacker. Joseph didn't stop at burglary and murder. His crimes escalated to include shootings and assaults. One notable incident occurred on December 12th, 1975, when Detective William McGowan was on a stakeout trying to catch the ransacker. As Joseph sneaked into a backyard, McGowan attempted to detain him. Joseph pretended to surrender, but then pulled out a revolver and shot McGowan, narrowly missing his face. So, what exactly happened? Joseph was going in and he got caught because they knew that this neighborhood was being broken into, burglarized a lot. And so they had police cars set up. You would think that this would have deterred Joseph, but it didn't. I honestly feel like it just made things a little bit more exciting for him, knowing that he wouldn't be able to get caught even if the police were there. So, when McGowan attempted to detain Joseph, Joseph was in the middle of taking off his mask. And while McGowan was trying to get a good look at Joseph to see who he was, he got a little distracted. And that's when Joseph pulled out a gun and he shot at McGowan. He actually ended up shooting the flashlight that McGowan had in his hand. And when he shot the flashlight, the glass from the flashlight actually ended up getting in McGowan's eyes. So, yeah, he didn't get shot in the face, but Joseph did shoot the flashlight and the glass got into his face and his eyes. So he pretended to surrender, but then he pulled out a revolver, narrowly missing his face, and he managed to escape yet again, leaving behind evidence like a shattered flashlight and shoe prints. This bold escape only added to his terrifying legend. As if his Visalia crimes weren't enough, Joseph moved on to become the notorious East Area Rapist. Between 1976 and 1979, he attacked women across the Sacramento. As if his Visalia crimes weren't enough, Joseph moved on to become the notorious East Area Rapist. Between 1976 and 1979, he attacked women across the Sacramento and other counties, committing numerous rapes and terrorizing communities. He targeted areas like Carmichael, Citrus Heights, and Rancho Cordero. These places were perfect for him because they were full of one-story homes that had lots of open spaces like schools, creeks, and trails where he could easily make a quick escape. Joseph was super crafty. He would stalk middle class neighborhoods at night, looking for women alone in their homes. He'd break in through windows or sliding doors, then he'd wake up his victims with a flashlight, threatening them with a handgun. He was seen several times, but always managed to escape. There was even an incident where he shot and seriously injured a young man who tried to chase him down. Now, if you could imagine, like, when you're sleeping, you're already like, you're in this calm state. But then imagine someone like quietly breaking into your house and then waking you up and disorienting you even further with a literal flashlight in your face and a gun. Like, imagine how, like, disoriented you are. Anyway, his methodical approach made him one of the most feared criminals in California. Initially, Joseph focused on women who were alone or with their children. But as media coverage grew, suggesting that he only targeted solitary women, he adapted. He began attacking couples, turning his crimes even more violent. His method was terrifying: break into a home, wake up the occupants with a flashlight, and threaten them with a gun. He would then bind the victims with shoelaces or ripped towels, blindfold them, and gag them. The female victim was usually forced to tie up her male partner first, and the way he tied these bindings left victims' hands numb for hours after they were free. So, a little backstory about Joseph: he actually served in the Navy. So, he was really, really, really good at tying knots. His psychological manipulation was just terrifying. He would stack dishes on the male victim's back, warning them that he would kill everyone if he heard the dishes rattle. Then he'd take the woman into the other room and rape her repeatedly. This wasn't just about physical violence, it was about instilling fear and control. Joseph's psychological warfare didn't stop there. Sometimes he'd spend hours in victims' homes, rummaging through their belongings, eating their food, and making himself comfortable. Victims often believed he had left, only for him to suddenly reappear, causing further fear and chaos. He would steal personal items like jewelry or small keepsakes, items of little value but high personal significance. It was as if he wanted to leave a mark, a reminder of his intrusion. And if that's not creepy enough, during one of his rapes in 1978, he reportedly kept saying, "I hate you, Bonnie." Bonnie was the ex girlfriend who had broken off their engagement years earlier. It just gives a glimpse into his twisted mind and perhaps a motive behind his cruelty. From June 1976 to May 1977, Joseph operated primarily in Sacramento County, but he didn't stay put. After a short break, he continued his attacks in San Juan County and then returned to Sacramento, carrying out a string of assaults. In 1978, his attacks spread to Salis and Yolo counties, before shifting focus to Contra Costa County, where he continued his spree until July of 1979. His crimes were escalating in violence and frequency, leaving communities terrified. Residents were on edge, and police were desperate to catch him. But Joseph was always one step ahead, disappearing just as suddenly as he would strike. One of the most significant events during his crime spree was the murder of Brian and Katie McGorry. On February 2nd, 1978, this young couple was out walking their dog in Ranchero Corvero, where they encountered Joseph. A confrontation ensued and they attempted to flee, but Joseph chased them down and shot them both. This murder sent shockwaves through the community, and it was later confirmed that Joseph was responsible, adding murder to his list of crimes. By the end of the 1970s, Joseph moved his focus to Southern California, where he became known as the original Night Stalker. Between 1979 and 1981, he shifted from rape to murder, killing his victims in their homes. His first attack in Santa Barbara County saw a couple survive by alerting neighbors, but others weren't so lucky. His victims were bludgeoned or shot. He became known as the Night Stalker in Southern California until another criminal, Richard Ramirez, claimed the name. Joseph's crimes were later rebranded to distinguish them from Ramirez's. Joseph's Southern California crime spree included the murders of several couples and individuals. In October of 1979, he killed Dr. Robert Offerman and Dr. Deborah Manning in Gultia, leaving behind little evidence but the terror of his capability. Moving on to March 13th, 1980, in Ventura, California, Joseph struck again. This time, Charlene Smith, an interior designer, and her husband, Lyman Smith, a prominent attorney, were found murdered in their home. Charlene was also raped, and the scene was brutal. A log from their woodpile was used to bludgeon them to death. When Lyman's 12-year-old son came over to mow the lawn, he discovered their bodies. Imagine how horrific that must have been for him. The killer used a unique knot, called a diamond knot, to bind Charlene, a method that linked him to his previous crimes committed by the East Area rapist. The media dubbed him to be the Diamond Knot Killer for this chilling signature. The terror didn't stop there. On August 19th, in an upscale community of Dana Point, newlyweds Keith and Patricia Harrington were found bludgeoned to death in their home. Patrice, a pediatric nurse, was also raped. Keith was a medical student with a bright future ahead of him. The crime scene was gruesome, with Patrice's face so severely beaten that it was beyond recognition. Their bodies showed signs of being tied, but no murder weapon or ligatures were found. This case hit the Harrington family hard, and Keith's brother Bruce later became a staunch advocate for DNA collection laws to help catch criminals like the one who took his brother's life. And that's going to come in handy later, so just keep that in mind, guys. As if 1980 wasn't terrifying enough, the nightmare continued into 1981. On February 6th, in Irvine County, 28-year-old Manella Wuhuden was raped and murdered in her home. Her husband was hospitalized at the time, leaving her alone and vulnerable. The crime scene was staged to look like a botched robbery with her television left outside. But investigators suspected something far more sinister. The lack of ligatures and the brutality of the attack suggested a deeper, more personal violence. So, Joseph was said, and I feel like we talk about kind of like raunchy things on here a lot, so I'm a little okay with saying that. Joseph was said to not be so well endowed. Like, he was said to essentially like have a small penis. And so they were thinking that he wasn't even like really a lot of his previous victims from when he was raping, just like raping the victims and not killing them, they kind of said that like it didn't really seem like he was enjoying it. Like he wasn't like they basically said like it seemed like he wasn't getting pleasure out of it. There was one account where this is I gave a trigger warning at the beginning. There was one account where he essentially raped, I believe it was like a 13-year-old girl, and she told him she was a virgin, and whenever they went and checked her out, they were like, your hymen's not broken. So, yeah, Joseph wasn't very well endowed. And they're thinking like a lot of the like overkill was maybe due to like his own non satisfaction, I guess, like him being basically just disappointed in himself. But anyway, later that year, on July 27th, Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez were attacked in a house in Galata. Sherry was staying at the residence temporarily, and the killer managed to enter through a small bathroom window. Gregory was shot and wounded in the cheek before being bludgeoned to death with a garden tool. It's believed Gregory realized they were facing the same killer responsible for the Offerman Manning murders and tried to fight back. Despite the gunshot, no one responded to the noise, allowing the killer to complete his horrific deed. Sherry was raped and beaten, and her body bore the signs of being tied up, although the restraints were missing. Authorities believe the killer might have worked in the area, possibly a painter due to the fibers on the scene. Then, on May 4th, 1986, in Irvine, California, 18-year-old Janetta Lisa Cruz was found dead in her home. She had been raped and brutally bludgeoned. Her family was vacationing in Mexico, leaving her alone in the house, which was up for sale. The discovery was made by a realtor showing the home to potential buyers. Janelle's murder was particularly savage, with her body beaten beyond recognition. Investigators later suspected a pipe wrench was used as the weapon, but by then the killer had slipped away once more. Initially, these Southern California murders weren't linked to each other or the earlier crimes committed by the East Area rapist. A Sacramento detective, however, strongly believed there was a connection between the Goleta attacks and the infamous rapist from Northern California. Despite his suspicions, local police in Southern California were focused on leads that pointed to local suspects close to the victims, even charging an innocent man with two of the murders. It wasn't until years later, with the advent of DNA technology, that these cases were linked together, confirming that the same person was responsible for these heinous acts. DNA evidence became the key that unlocked the truth, revealing that Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. was the man behind the mask, the elusive Golden State Killer. Now, imagine the audacity of a criminal who not only commits heinous acts, but sends poetry to the media boasting about it. Now, this is the Serial Zodiac, and we have talked about serial killers that taunt the media or taunt the families, but Joseph, just keep listening. In December of 1977, a poem titled Excitement's Crave arrived at the Sacramento Bee, the Sacramento mayor's office, and a local TV station, KVIE. It was allegedly penned by the East Area rapist himself. Here's how it went. All those mortals surviving birth upon facing maturity take inventory of their worth to prevailing society. Choosing values becomes a task. Oneself must seek satisfaction. The selected route will unmask character when plans take action, accepting some work to perform, at fixed pay but promise for more, is a recognized social norm as a decorum seeking lore. Achieving while others lifting should be cause for deserving fame. Leisure tempts excitement seeking. What's right and expected seems tame. Jesse James has been seen by all, and Son of Sam has an author. Others now feel temptation's call. Sacramento should make an offer to make a movie of my life. That will pay for my planned exile. Just now, I'd like to add the wife of a mafia lore to my file. Your East Area rapist and deserving pest. See you on the press or on TV. It was like reading the diary of someone who views himself as a misunderstood antihero. Now, they didn't confirm that this was written by Joseph. They the person who wrote it claimed to be the East Area rapist. But honestly, how long do you have to sit there to think of something like this? Like the entire poem is just narcissistic and very much so attention seeking, but also how disrespectful to your victims to just be taunting the media like this. On December 9th, 1978, during the investigation of the 42nd attack in Danville, investigators stumbled upon something curious: a few sheets of notebook paper near a suspicious vehicle. These pages seemed to have been dropped accidentally, and what they revealed was both intriguing and unsettling. One sheet appeared to be simple homework essay on General Custer, but the other was far more personal. It was a journal entry from a deeply troubled individual recalling his sixth grade year. Mad is the word that reminds me of sixth grade. I hated that year. I wish I had known what was going to be going on during my sixth grade year, the last and worst year of elementary school. Mad is the word that remains in my head about my dreadful year as a sixth grader. My madness was one that caused by disappointments that hurt me very much. Disappointments from my teacher, such as field trips that were planned and canceled. My sixth grade teacher gave me a lot of disappointment, which made me very mad and made me build a state of hatred in my heart. No one ever let me down that hard before, and I never hated anyone as much as I did him. Disappointment wasn't the only reason that made me mad my sixth grade class. Anything was getting me in trouble at school, especially talking. That's what really bugged me, was writing sentences. Those awful sentences my teacher made me write. Hours and hours I'd sit and write 50, 100, 150 sentence day and night. I write those dreadful paragraphs which embarrassed me, and more important, it made me ashamed of myself, which in turn, deep down inside, made me realize that writing sentence wasn't fair. It wasn't fair and made me suffer like that. It wasn't fair and it made me sit and write until my bones ached, until my hand felt every horrid pain ever had as I wrote. I got madder and madder until I cried. I cried because I was ashamed. I cried because I was disgusted. I cried because I was mad. And I cried for myself, kid who kept on having to write those dang sentences. My angriness from sixth grade will scar my memory for life, and I will be ashamed for my sixth grade year forever. But the last sheet was the most mysterious: a hand drawn map of a suburban neighborhood, marked ominously with the word punishment scrawled across it. Detective Larry Poole believed this map to be a fantasy, a layout of the rapist's ideal hunting ground. It showed the methodical nature of someone planning every detail of his attacks, like an architect of terror. But this wasn't his only mode of communication. Joseph used the phone like a weapon. Throughout his reign of terror, the Golden State Killer made a series of phone calls that were just as chilling as his physical attacks. The first major call came on March 18th, 1977. The Sacramento County Sheriff's Office received 3 calls from a man claiming to be the East Area rapist. The first 2 calls were identical, ending with creepy laughter before hanging up. The third call, the third call was more direct, taunting the police by saying, I'm the East Side rapist, and I have my next victim already stalked, and you guys can't even catch me. Now, by December 2nd, 1977, Joseph was getting older. He called the Sacramento Police Department, cursing them out and bragging about his next attack. That night, he struck again, proving his threats were far from empty. It's like he wanted to toy with everyone, flaunting his ability to evade capture. The holidays didn't stop him from being a menace either. During Christmas of 77, a previous victim got a phone call that still haunts her. "Merry Christmas, it's me again." The call was a sinister reminder that he was still out there, watching and ready to strike again. Shortly after this taunt, two identical calls warned of an attack on Watt Avenue. This was no idle threat. Authorities increased patrols, and sure enough, a masked man was spotted that night. He managed to elude capture once more, leaving a stolen bicycle in his wake. Now, we talk about a lot of criminals on this podcast. And if you want me to be honest, I do not condone or even think that any of this, I think all of it's horrible. But I have to give credit where credit is due. Joseph was very smart. Like he was a very smart criminal. Leaving a bicycle so you could get away on a bicycle. And hear me out. Yes, you would think it's a bicycle, a car. A car could easily catch up to a bicycle. But you have to think that Joseph was doing this in neighborhoods. And a lot of times you can cut through someone's backyard in a neighborhood and get away and go to a different part of the neighborhood. But you can't do that in a car. A car isn't going to allow you to cut through people's yards. You're not going to catch someone on foot who's riding a bike. So, like, he was like an evil genius. Like, it was, it was a good idea. It worked. He got away. He managed to elude capture once more, leaving a stolen bicycle in his wake. This cat and mouse game was his forte, keeping everyone on edge. In January of 1978, Joseph's cruelty hit new heights. The first known rape victim received a chilling call where he repeatedly threatened, gonna kill you, bitch, 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 fucking whore." It's a horrifying insight into his mind, showcasing the malice he harbored towards his victims. Then, on January 6, 1978, he called a counseling service, claiming to be the East Area rapist and expressing a desire to stop his attacks. The conversation was brief, and he hung up, suspecting the call was being traced. Now, was this a genuine cry for help or just another twisted game? Even years after his known attacks, the calls didn't stop. In 1982, he brazenly called a victim at her workplace, threatening to rape her again. Imagine being in this woman's shoes, haunted by a voice from your past in a public space like a Denny's restaurant. In 1991, a victim received another call, this time hearing a woman and children in the background. This sparked speculation that the rapist had a family, living a double life. The idea that he could be someone's husband and father, all while being a monster, added a chilling dimension to his persona. In 2001, a victim received a call that was a reminder of the horror she'd faced. "Remember when I played?" It was the final act of terror. Just as authorities were linking him to more unsolved crimes, it was a taunt that reignited fear and underscored the enduring impact of his reign of terror. The investigation to catch Joseph was relentless, driven by advances in DNA technology and sheer determination. Before the link between the original Night Stalker and the East Area Rapist was made official, some law enforcement officers suspected it due to similarities in his crimes. The key breakthrough came in 2001 when DNA evidence linked him to several unsolved murders, bringing the puzzle pieces together. In 2016, the FBI announced a reward to push to solve the case, releasing composite sketches and offering a $50,000 reward for information. This nationwide appeal finally bore fruit in 2018 when Joseph James DeAngelo was identified through genetic genealogy. Joseph was caught after investigators uploaded the killer's DNA profile to a genealogy website, identifying distant relatives. Through meticulous work, they constructed a family tree that led them to Joseph, a former police officer who had managed to hide in plain sight for years. Now, remember earlier when I said one of the victims' brothers became heavily involved in the laws allowing police officers to access DNA? Well, that brother is basically responsible for them catching Joseph. Without those laws being passed, the police would not have been able to use genetic genealogy. So, I guess one good thing did happen out of this. For one, he was incredibly meticulous in covering his tracks. He wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints behind, and he used his knowledge of police procedures, having worked as a police officer himself, to avoid detection. He also created chaos by committing crimes across various regions, which initially made it difficult for law enforcement to connect the dots. In addition to his cunning methods, there were failures in communication between different law enforcement agencies, which allowed him to slip through the cracks. His seemingly normal life also played a role in his ability to evade capture. Joseph had a family, a job, and a facade of normalcy that masked his dark double life. In court, at the end of his trial in 2020, Joseph confessed to his crimes, attributing them to his alter ego named Jerry. He claimed Jerry made him commit these heinous acts, but it was a flimsy excuse that couldn't mask the horror of his actions. He was sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. His guilty plea spared him the death penalty, but ensured he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. As victims and their families delivered impact statements, the true extent of his terror was laid bare. Joseph offered a hollow apology, acknowledging the pain he'd caused, but offering little comfort to those he'd hurt. All right, kids, so how are we feeling about Joseph? We all agree he was a horrible fucking person, right? Right, okay. Anyway, I am so incredibly happy to be back and I can't wait to deliver you guys episodes. I can't promise I'm not going to disappear again. I do be disappearing kind of often, but I am so happy that I got to put out this episode for you, and I will for sure be here throughout the rest of the year. Anyway, that's the end of this one. Can't wait to see you next time. Till then, stay safe, stay vigilant, stay curious, and stay suspicious, bitches. Love you. Bye.